Professor Philip Goodman has become semi-famous for a TV program in which he exposes fake paranormal activity. So when he receives a tantalizing invitation from a childhood hero previously thought disappeared, he sets out to find the truth behind 3 unsolvable ghost stories. Ghost Stories is an adaptation of a theatre play that's been incredibly popular in London for the last, it seems forever, but probably about 5 years. Pretty much everyone I know who's seen it has recommended me to go and see it, so I was really excited to finally find out there was going to be a film of it. Not only is it written by and directed by and starring the same people who made the play so successful, it's also got an amazing cast attached to it and a great producer in Claire Jones. Claire Jones is best known for producing the first couple of films from Ben Wheatley like Kill List, Sightseers and A Field in England. So it's obvious she has a track record in identifying and making these sort of cult hits that have crossover genre elements but are recognisably very British films. And that's something that we, I think, try to do a lot and don't often succeed at in British filmmaking. Now, the plot of Ghost Stories is such that I feel like I'll spoil it if I tell you too many details, so I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis of the 3 main stories that make it up and a little bit about the frame story around the sides. The first story, and probably the scariest one by my reckoning, involved Paul Whitehouse as a night watchman in an old kind of women's home / sanatorium. These are the kind of places that Victorians basically used to hide women who were sort of unacceptable in society for various reasons, whether they'd had problems with mental health, or if they were pregnant by the wrong people and they had to be hushed up, stuff like that. That's got a very traditional sort of phantom in it that I don't want to spoil, but it's absolutely shit your pants terrifying at certain points. The second story involves Alex Lawther as a very nervous teenager who's driving back from a party, and his overbearing parents keep ringing him, trying to get him to come back, and he's involved in an accident in a mysterious dark place in the woods. That one's definitely more comedic than it is horrific, but then that's one of the nice things about anthology films, that you can have quite different tones and even different stylistic devices within the same kind of feature budget, basically, and narrative. And last but definitely not least, Martin Freeman plays this cocky, smarmy banker who's awaiting the birth of his first child when something spooky happens in his new build fancy mansion place. The frame story I can't really say much about without spoiling it. Just suffice to say that the production design in this section of the film is phenomenal and does a really good job of setting up some stuff that then begins to play off as he gets kind of deeper into the world of the actually paranormal, as opposed to the easily disproven medium kind of paranormal. It should be said that the casting in this film is incredible. You know, Martin Freeman is basically the closest thing we have to a bona fide global superstar in the UK. What with the original series The Office, then growing to The Hobbit, and of course Sherlock, he's an international name, and his involvement in Marvel and Black Panther has only made that bigger. Hopefully he'll help sell it to the rest of the world, because very few other people in the film have that sort of recognition outside of the UK. You know, that being said, Paul Whitehouse, who's the main guy in the first section of the film, is a really famous comedian, essentially, in the UK. And it was really nice to see him stretch his dramatic muscle here. I was pleasantly surprised by him. You know, his involvement in sketch comedy in the 90s and in the noughties, he's really good in what he does, but I've never seen him really push himself like he has in this film. I think he does a really good job in it. Alex Lawther is kind of more of an emerging talent. You'll definitely recognise him from End of the Fucking World if you've seen it, and if you haven't, then you should. So that's a really interesting bit of forward casting, where I think he's probably going to be someone who's a lot more famous in the next couple of years, but it's nice to have him in this because he's really good at what he does. Definitely his performance as this really nervous, twitchy, anxious guy really made me uncomfortable in his section of the film, so much so that I didn't want it to carry on most of the time, even though it is one of the funnier sections of the movie. It's not exactly new for British filmmakers to make genre films, but I feel like we're often outcompeted by the American market here. It's a big problem with British film that it shares a language with America that has so much more money and marketing and ultimately bigger audience shares. You know, people are more used to seeing films where people talk with American accents than they are to seeing films people talk with British accents. It's just an unfortunate fact about how movie-going habits are developed since the 1950s, basically. My bigger issue with it is that they often try to move away from their inherent British character, I suppose, and that ends up with the film feeling weirdly bland, like it's kind of pretending to be a thing that it isn't. Ghost Stories does have a lot of pretty well-used tropes that are from horror films. In particular, it's a big fan of having its characters framed with an empty space, kind of off in the background, and it's just the kind of thing where you start looking at empty space, where's that spooky skelly boy in a pop-up? You know? Oh, there's a distorted face, blurry in the background. Spooky. But those tropes are tropes because they work, fundamentally, and Ghost Stories is a really scary film. Not only that, but it avoids some of the more annoying generic scary things that are popular at the moment. If you ever watch Red Letter Media, which is a really good film review channel on YouTube, then you can see them talk about horror quite a lot, and basically how, for some reason, every horror film has to have backwards talking kids and like glass explosions, like windows seem to blow in all the time. Ghost Stories doesn't really do that shit. I couldn't really call it reserved as a film, but it definitely has a more subtle horror in it a lot of the time. And away from those more common horror tropes, there's also a lot in this film that is specifically about Britain today. You know, we've got a working class protagonist who can't find a job and doesn't like how the world's changing around him. We've got this kid who is incredibly anxious and nervous and is stuck living at home even though he's like in his mid-20s. We've got Martin Freeman as this banker who basically doesn't seem to really care about anyone or anything, things that really seem to happen to him that have any consequence. And those are all things that are, you know, big issues in British society at the moment. And another connection, of course, is that we have a really rich tradition of anthology horror films being made in the UK. It's one that is a little bit fallen kind of out of recognition. It's been a little bit forgotten, but it's something that I definitely know the League of Gentlemen, of whom Jeremy Dyson co-directed this film, is one of the members. They definitely know about it because it's referenced in Psychoville, and Mark Gatiss talks about it in his series on horror as well. If you want to find out more about the British involvement in the horror anthology genre and how we essentially developed it from where it was with EC Comics to where it is now with stuff like VHS, then you would definitely be in a good position to watch my video about that. My Genre 101 film on British anthology horrors, which I've put in a little card here and also linked in the bio down below. All in all, you end up with a movie that feels like it could really sell well, particularly in the States, but also elsewhere in the world, I think, while also retaining a particular British character. And I think that's a really tough thing to do that they pull off really well here. So go and see Ghost Stories in the cinema, and just remember to go see it in the middle of the day so you can actually get some sleep afterwards, because it is really, really scary. That's it from me, but I'd love to hear what you think in the comments box down below, so please let me know. And don't forget to click like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and you want to see the next one when it comes out. Have a good one. Bye for now.